Hello and welcome to Jessie Bear Book Club. Today we are talking about The Lily and the Lion, one of the final books in Maurice Druon's Accursed Kings series. This book opens with the marriage of Edward III to Philip of Hainaut and the sad realization of Isabella that she is no longer the queen, only the queen mother, and that dealing with Mortimer's constant jealousy is draining mentally, and it's costing her public opinion. Even though she loves Mortimer dearly, she can see his faults, but she is busy dreaming of France, because her brother King Charles is dying, and she hopes to inherit his crown because he still hasn't fathered a son. While King Charles lies dying in his sickbed, Robert of Artois is busy trying to secure the regency for Philip of Valois, Charles's cousin, because Charles's wife is pregnant, and it could be a boy. They're worried they're looking at another King John the Posthumous situation. But luckily for Philip of Valois, now Philip VI of France, it's a girl. However, England have sent a bishop to argue the case of Queen Isabella becoming Queen of France in her own right because she is the last remaining child of Philip the Fair. But when the Salic law is invoked, and it is obvious to everyone that Isabella can't rule France, the bishop then puts forward the idea of Edward, King of England, her son and the grandson of Philip the Fair, becoming the ruler of France, and that goes down like a lead balloon. So all hail Philip VI, the first Valois king. Could you imagine if Charles of Valois could see his son now? He would be smiling ear to ear. I like the description of Philip VI as the makeshift king. He looks like a king, he's tall, he's handsome, he's very good in tourneys, he has a booming voice. He looks just like you would imagine a medieval king should look. But he is not overly intelligent. But as long as he has good ministers around him, that shouldn't be a problem, should it? Of course, Philip's main advisor is Robert of Artois, his cousin, who is still trying to fight his aunt Maud to get his county back. When the documents Robert is looking for that would prove he owned Artois go missing, he decides he will forge the documents because Maud will never be able to admit in court that she had the originals destroyed. And how could anything go wrong for Robert? He has the support of the new makeshift King Philip. In the background of this all going on, King Edward of England arrives at the biggest tourney ever held to render homage for his lands in France to his cousin, the new King Philip the Makeshift. I really like sensible young Edward. I love the line about how a child from a disordered home claims calm themselves as they reach independence. Edward is only 16, but very sensible. Now the book follows Robert of Artois as he goes around trying to reproduce the fake documents. In the middle of his attempts to produce the forgeries, Robert goes around to try and prove Maud destroyed the originals, and we get to see Fat Bouville again. He is old and nearly blind and very lonely, and it makes me incredibly sad. I wanted to cry when I was reading this, and he always wanted to do the right thing, Fat Bouville, even if it never went to plan. Robert gets all his evidence and creates his forgeries with the help of his wife, only for them to be read out for the first time in public and for the dates to be wrong by 30 years. This actually made me laugh out loud on my plane while I was reading this part of the book. For this one small thing to be wrong, it's cataclysmic. It points directly at Robert that these are forgeries. And to be honest, it's the sort of thing I would get wrong, so I found it hilarious. Enter Beatrice Dearson, who has decided no longer to side with Maud. Beatrice is restless in Maud's household as Maud is growing old, and this felt very human. Beatrice and Robert of Artois have an affair, and this has been building since book 1, so I am glad we finally got some sexy time with these two. I've also enjoyed seeing inside Beatrice's head, especially when it came to her worshipping the devil and the dark arts, because Beatrice has always intrigued me, and we finally get evidence of her magical practices. Beatrice decides to poison Maout because she has her eyes on becoming Robert of Artois' wife, even though he's already married to the king's sister. This seemed very unrealistic. Beatrice was overestimating Robert of Artois' love for her by spades loads. This scene where Beatrice poisons Maout after Maout banquets with the king was deliciously evil. Her nursing of Maout as she grew iller and iller reminded me of whatever happened to baby Jane, especially the bit right at the end where Beatrice whispers in the dying woman's ear that she has poisoned her patroness for love of her greatest enemy. Beatrice's immense disappointment that Robert of Artois doesn't make her a maid in his wife's service immediately seems realistic to us, the reader, but to Beatrice this is a crushing blow. Beatrice then takes service with the new Countess of Artois, Maout's daughter Jeanne, the widow, only for Jeanne to become mysteriously ill and die within a month of her mother. The book then moves back to England and the plot Mortimer cooks up to deceive the Earl of Kent and trap him in treason is so cruel. I liked the Earl of Kent. He was a little bit dim, but kind, and Edward's growing resentment of Mortimer comes from this moment on, especially as his uncle of Kent was executed without the king's knowledge. Edward's complete horror when he realizes Mortimer has gotten his mother, the Queen Dowager, pregnant outside marriage feels very realistic for the Middle Ages. And now Isabella, former Queen of England, Queen Dowager, Queen Mother, is nothing but a silly whore in her son King Edward III's eyes. This scene where Edward breaks down the door to arrest Mortimer in his mother, the Queen's chamber, and Isabella is barefoot in her nightdress, pregnant and crying, and all Edward can think is Mortimer has brought his most royal mother to this, is very childlike and adult at the same time. If you are a child of divorce, you probably know what I'm talking about. Mortimer's reincarceration in the Tower has great callbacks to the beginning of the She-Wolf, but this time Mortimer's hope of escape is dead before he is. I kind of wish, because this book is fictionalized, that Isabella had been present for Mortimer's execution, but I understand in actual history she wasn't there, and Druon wanted to be true to some world events. Back to France. Robert and Beatrice's affair has lost its spark, and Beatrice is realizing that Robert is never going to keep any of his promises to her, and that she cannot trap him with the love potions or a baby. Robert's case to get his county back from the Duchess of Burgundy, Maout's granddaughter, is going very badly, and Beatrice, annoyed at Robert, decides to be vengeful and tell the Burgundian court that Robert has been forging seals in his documents. Robert's accomplice, La Divion, is arrested by the king's men, but when Robert goes to the king to get her released, the king knows nothing of it, and they discover his wife, Queen Jeanne, the Lame of Burgundy, has taken his seal. The scene where King Philippe beats his wife Jeanne for the theft and use of his private seal is shocking, because up until this point in the story, there had been nothing but love between them, and Queen Jeanne finally confesses to hating Robert of Artois with a vengeance because he was involved in the downfall of her sister Marguerite in Book 1 and 2. Robert knows who has sown the seeds of all of this, so he has Beatrice murdered and framed as a witch. Well, because she is one, and it's a fitting end for Beatrice. She was very interesting, but horrible. She had at least 6 people killed that we know about. But Robert's revenge is for nothing, as La Divion has confessed to forging all the seals, and Robert is hoping that playing dumb will save him. Then there is the great tourney hosted by King Philip and the King of Bohemia, and I love the description of the massive festival of arms. I especially loved the bit where ladies were ripping the sleeves off their gowns as favours for their special gallant knights because they wanted to show off their shapely arms. Robert of Artois is there, of course, avoiding the King of France and insulting Burgundy every chance he gets. I especially loved the bit where Queen Jeanne of Burgundy tries to touch Robert of Artois' helmet to shame him, as a lady touching a man's helmet means he is a liar in the courtly love game. Ooh, how devilish. I'm a big courtly love nerd. I found this incredibly titillating. King Philip warns Robert of Artois privately to stop persisting that the documents he has are real because they have been proven to be fakes. Robert, however, continues to insist that all the seals attached to these forged documents are real, sealing his fate because now he will be accused publicly of forgery and perjury. Robert is incredibly angry that King Philip won't lie for him, as he believes Philip would not have the throne of France if he, Robert, had not stepped in to seize it for him. He sees Philip as weak. Philip, however, is a man of honour, and even though he loves Robert as a cousin and a brother-in-law, he knows that Robert's case to retain Artois is completely lost and steeped in sinister dealings. I really like the fact that this conversation between these two very powerful men, who are so similar, takes place while they are both in the bath at their most vulnerable. Princes of the blood arguing about something so serious while completely nude is so absurd it is almost believable. It also reminded me of gangster movies when they're having a steam and discussing all their dirty dealings. Then good old Ptolemy turns up again, and he is dying, but as a final act of defiance against the French throne, as the throne are expelling and crippling all Lombard train, he acts as a bank for Robert of Artois so he can flee France for England before his trial as a forger begins. Reading Robert's trial, you get a real sense of the fact he has spent the last 40 years in vain trying to get his county back, using all the means at his disposal, legal and illegal. La Divion is even burnt alive because of her compliance in his crimes, and his children and wife are in jail because he, Robert, ran away from justice. Despite all of this, however, Robert is still strangely likable in his escapades, travelling around Europe getting kicked out of every kingdom and county because the King of France keeps writing letters telling everyone that he doesn't like his cousin Robert anymore. His escapades are extremely amusing to read, especially when Robert starts using magic to assassinate the King of France and his councillors, and then becomes incredibly despondent when the magic assassination doesn't work. I see a little bit of Beatrice's influence in that. Robert eventually goes to England and starts fermenting ideas in Edward III's head that he is actually the rightful King of France through the direct line, and to be honest, Robert's not wrong. But Robert then becomes irritated at how long Edward is taking to get things moving to mount his campaign. Back in France, Philip VI is laughing at the idea of Edward III of England trying to claim the crown of France, and he is aware that Robert of Artois is manipulating the young Edward. Philip is also aware that for a long time Robert was manipulating him. Robert of Artois has been running the same manipulation game for years on different people and has now simply changed his focus from Philippe to Edward. The book at this point has moved forward in time 9 to 10 years, and I am enjoying it, but it is not the same as the early books. I don't have the same connection to the characters as I did when reading the first 3 books, as all the characters we got connected to are now dead. Robert of Artois finally manages to shame Edward III into going to war with France, and the scene Robert does with the heron and all the people announcing their weird oaths to go to war was brilliant. However, my favourite bit was finding out that Edward III has been corrupted slightly by age and is looking to take a mistress, as his beloved Philippa is pregnant again with their third child. What follows is a list of the English campaign in France up to Robert of Artois' death at a siege where he takes a crossbow bolt in the leg and dies of wound fever on his way back to England. I felt cheated by Robert of Artois' death. We had Mahout get her comeuppance. We had Beatrice la Disson get her comeuppance. We even had Louis the Hutin die horribly, but Robert dies looking at the stars. And we didn't get any POVs of his dying moments, apart from him yelling in his fevered state like he was trying to win a court case. I felt let down by this. Robert has been our main character since book 1, so I felt they did him dirty. He should have had a more horrific death, because he was a pretty bad guy, even though I liked him. But I suppose Maurice Druon was trying to be historically accurate in some way. The main story of the book kinda ends there, and we get an epilogue which jumps forward 14 years, which follows Giannino Baglioni as he finds out the origins of his birth. And again I felt cheated. We didn't get to see Guccio die, and he is one of the characters I really would have liked to have seen die, as he wasn't a nice person at all. And we never get to see Marie again, and that made me sad because Marie had such an unhappy life. It's odd how this small piece of information about his birth completely ruins Giannino's life because he decides to embrace the fact that he is a prince of France and spends the end of his life as a pretender to the French throne, trying in vain to get anyone to support him, and he ends up dying in prison. I get the distinct impression that this book was meant to be the last in the series, but we still have The King Without a Kingdom to go. But that was written 17 years after the original series, so how well it's going to fit in is up to anyone's guess. I give The Lily and the Lion a solid 7 out of 10. It's a good tie-up book. It closes off a lot of the through threads from book 1, especially the Templar's Curse, Robert and Mahout's feud, Isabella and Mortimer. Even if I did feel let down by Robert of Artois' death, it wraps up the Lombard plot. I also missed the characters from book 1, and there is a lot of time jumps in this book compared with the others, which was a little disconcerting, but I guess I can live with it. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss next week's review of The King Without a Kingdom, the final book in the Accursed King series. I have a feeling Joan of Arc is going to pop up in A King Without a Kingdom. Leave me a comment with your thoughts on The Lily and the Lion, and give this video a like because it is the only way the tyrannical YouTube algorithm notices me at all. And until next time, don't counterfeit any seals. Bye!